If you believe the headlines, your next surgery is going to be done by a robot dentist and your packages are going to be arriving on an electric autonomous semi. But in reality, that's nowhere near the full story.
Most of the healthcare pundits think that one of the easiest areas to cut costs out of the budget and drive savings is in rebasing Medicaid. And so we're talking about potentially $2.3 trillion of savings over the next 10 years.
You know, the other trend that is often talked about is electrification of vehicles. I see that as a 30+ year issue. I don't think it's anywhere in our horizon.
Today, we're going to reveal why the timeline for robotics and electric trucks and AI in healthcare, why they're both closer and further away than we think. Let's dive in. But first, we're going to start with the recent political cost pressures in the US.
Yeah, on the healthcare side, we have a number of healthcare assets at DuneGlass Capital. And I think one of the things that you have to take seriously right now, although it failed from an executive order standpoint, this federal funds distribution freeze, I think it's really portending a law that's likely to get passed. Most of the healthcare pundits think that one of the easiest areas to cut costs out of the budget and drive, 10-year projected savings is in rebasing Medicaid. And so we're talking about potentially $2.3 trillion of savings over the next 10 years. And frankly, we have to find some cost savings somewhere. We're spending too much money. And what I think is interesting, you're talking about raising the poverty level for Medicaid eligibility. You're talking about adding work requirements, scaling back some of the funding in certain states. And already people are kind of up in arms about some of these things. And I like to remind folks, to make it apolitical, the Republicans currently are talking about bringing it back to where Bill Clinton had it. So it's an interesting way to think about some of these reforms were actually pretty logical back in the last time that we actually had a balanced budget and even a slight surplus. So it seems like there's some ways that we can start to add a little bit more, flexibility into how some of these government programs are developed.
Right. What about you, Mike? What trends do you see?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of roll-up in our industry. There are a lot of our customers are mom-and-pop type rebuilding shops, and I think that will further get kind of rolled up between bigger players in the space. And I think there's going to be more broad sophistication across the industry and professionalism or whatnot. I think that a lot of the companies are getting to a scale now where they can create further efficiency. And then the other trend that is often talked about is the electrification of vehicles.
Yeah.
I see that as a 30+ year issue. I don't think it's anywhere in our horizon. A lot of the industry that we played in is the semi-truck market, and it's too difficult right now to create a sustainable electric truck of that size. There's no infrastructure available right now in the United States to properly charge the vehicles, to replace the batteries or any of that sort across 300, 400, 500-mile drives. And until that gets fixed with the budget you were talking about, I don't see that as being a priority. So I think that our industry will kind of stay put for a couple of decades, at least, from that standpoint.
Right. So there's that trucking, like Nikola, I guess that's a little bit, you know what we're talking about?
Yeah.
They're a little bit far off, do you think, from reaching kind of...
So the problem is you take a semi-truck and it's heavy in nature, right? You create a battery that is strong enough and big enough to take it from point A to point B, which is how big is a tank of gasoline for those cars? 700 miles or something, right? So you can't create the battery to be big enough to work on a single charge. And then you take all the gas stations on the interstate system, unless they were to create a battery swapping program at every pilot and Lowe's and truck stop, it's not going to happen. Right. But then if you take that to its next extreme, is to have a battery swapping mechanism, you now have to create a battery that is going to be able to go into several different varieties of year, make, model caps.
Right.
And so the ability for a semi-truck to go to a stop and take a battery out, put a new one in, how long is that going to take? Or how long is it even going to be to charge that up? Yeah, I don't think you're going to get the same savings of time that you would on a gasoline.
Yeah. So that really talks to the realities of the hype, I guess, people see with electrification.
It's going to be very quickly adopted, as we've already seen on the short last mile delivery, like
Right.
inner cities. If you're only going 50 miles a day and you're going back to the same truck depot at night and you can recharge, that's going to happen very, very quickly. And already, as you see the Rivians with Amazon and other opportunities. But for long distances, I don't see it happening for a very long time.
Right. What about in dentistry? Do you think the robotics are further away than people think also, or you think it's closer? Do you have any sense of that?
My guess is I feel like I always estimate that something will take longer. It never does, right? So if I'd said, gosh, I think robotics and dentistry and more automation could be coming in the next, 5 to 7 years, it's probably 3 to 5 years. But I think it remains to be seen, what are we trying to gain from this? Are we trying to gain safer outcomes? Are we trying to reduce costs? Many of the robotic models that I've seen will absolutely not reduce costs. It's just a cost transference. They want to take more of the pie, and the pie is not getting any bigger. I would argue the pie is probably shrinking. So for one group to take more of a shrinking pie means somebody else is going to have to give that up. Typically, you don't see that happen rather quickly. So I think it remains to be seen on what you'll see on the robotics side. On AI, I think you will see some practical applications. We're already starting to hear about some developments of ER triage being entirely automated using an AI sequencer. A lot of what an ER doctor does is sort of quickly go through a series of, is it this, rule out that. And you think about how much faster and how much maybe even more efficient a computer might be able to do. That's going to save the hospital systems a lot of money. It's going to save all of us a lot of money. We all subsidize EMTALA-based visits, which basically means if you think you're having an emergency, it's deemed an emergency. It doesn't matter if, your upset stomach was upset stomach or a heart attack. We're going to treat it like it could have been a heart attack and, you're not on the hook for it. Well, we're all paying for that. So if there's a way that we could maybe triage some of those cases in a more cost-efficient way, it could help take further costs out of the system. And then I think you'll have a faster adoption rate, right? There's a use case where you say we're lowering the cost of care delivery. We're all searching for that in healthcare.
Right. So what advice do you both have for how leaders should kind of evaluate new technologies, think about kind of whether they're ready for prime time and ROI based on your experiences? Do you have any tips or thoughts?
I think it's very dependent on the business. In my experience, I think first you have to take the pulse of the users that are going to utilize the data. And first, as an executive, you've got to understand what the landscape is within your business and how something might help. And if you know it's true, then you got to, talk to your personnel and your direct reports and get from them kind of a broader vision in terms of, if this was here, could you envision what this would be like for your department and your day-to-day life? From there, then you start researching the different options, and you got to make sure that it fits your business. We had a very specialized business, and we were a little bit hamstrung in terms of the different vendors that we could work with when implementing different layers of the tech stack. So if you have a certain ERP system in a distribution business, you're then restricted to who can kind of connect into that and pull data from that and allow you to take that tech stack to the next generation. So knowing your specialization and how all the data would flow, I think is another key metric to think about.
Okay, great.
Yeah, in healthcare, I think one of the things that we're trying to focus on is just making sure we understand our own business. So can I get down to a metric of how many patient visits can my staff handle in a given day? How many phone calls can they answer? How many surgeries can be done, right? Almost getting it down to a time and motion study basis. Because I feel like the better we understand our business, the easier it is for us to validate, whether it's a total cost of ownership or the return on investment of investing in technology. It's easier for us to make that assessment if we know what the heck's going on in our own business. And I think too often, sometimes you're given the spec sheet from a tech company in their studies, and it says, look how much money you'll save, right? If you did these things, you'll save this amount of money. And the question we ask ourselves is, well, what if we don't do it that way? Is it going to save us any money? So, kind of knowing your own business first, and then it makes it a little bit easier to assess how can other parties help with your process.
So there you have it, folks. Electric semis won't be hitting the highways for a while. and robots that take an hour to do a 7-minute dental procedure.
I can't wait to see a patient's face when the robot says, error 404, tooth not found.
And that's exactly why you need a real-world perspective on AI, not the headline hype. If you found this interesting, we'd love to have you join our newsletter community. Having worked with hundreds of companies, I can't stress enough, if you jump into AI without understanding your cost structure, operational flows, adoption timeline, you're just going to be burning through your budget. We cover these and all kinds of other topics in our newsletter, so come learn with us, and we'll see you next time.